Oppo, OnePlus, Realme are all set to separate. BBK Electronics Corporation, the parent company of Oppo, OnePlus and Realme, has separated the three brands with sales accounted for in their own books. Now, China's largest smartphone maker is seen to be taking steps to de-risk its business from future government actions against Chinese companies. It is being reported that BBK has transferred sales and distribution of OnePlus and Realme into their legal entities. Oppo Mobile India will continue sales of its namesake brand. Remember, Oppo is under India government's lens already for alleged customs duty evasion, and the firm's auditors have warned, and I quote, of significant doubt on the company's ability to continue as a going concern. Joining us at this point in time is Tarun Pathak, who's the director of Counter Research. Also, Krishna Kumar continues to be with me here in the studio. Tarun, coming to you first, how are we to read these developments and what sort of impact will it have on the brand overall?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think it's an interesting development. If you look at the past couple of years, there's a lot that has happened with respect to the overall smartphone landscape in India with respect to the different OEMs. And these three different OEMs we are talking, they are capturing almost like 30% of the market. So obviously we have seen different, like these brands continues to grow. By the way, OnePlus just had their record month in India in the month of April. For the first time, they entered among the top five. So all these brands, they have this, they see India as a long-term opportunity. So I think they will do everything what they can to de-risk, looking at some of the futuristic opportunities, be it from the distribution side, the product side, or even from their operations with respect to manufacturing in India. So I think this is a step to like make sure all these three brands remain independent, but at the same time have very different strategies when it comes to go-to-market actions for this brand.
Okay. Tarun, from what we're given to understand, so far there has been, some sort of help that these brands would receive on the back end as far as their marketing and advertisement is concerned. With all three brands now working as separate entities, will there be more competition? Will there be no help that they receive? And since they were already competing, is the competition now going to get more and more furious because they're only competing for that set segment?
Correct. So I think the change is happening on the India as a region side, but if you look at from the China side, uh, all these three entities might be receiving a lot of like or sharing resources, be it in terms of R&D. So if you look at just from the Oppo's perspective, they spend billions of dollars on the R&D side of things, and obviously it doesn't make sense for the Realme to basically spend on at a similar scale, or OnePlus for that matter. So there will be shared resources maybe from the HQ side, but India, I think they want to like make sure their operations remain very different. But at the same time, we'll say that competition is definitely among the top five. But also there we have seen a sense of cannibalization happening within some of these brands in India. Like for example, the OnePlus growth is coming at the expense of some of the brands like Vivo or Oppo or even Realme for that matter in their segment. So I think it's not you can say that very direct competition of these brands, but at the same time in the background one can expect a shared resources happening at maybe at the global scale or the global level.
Right. If I were to ask you from a pure consumer perspective, people looking to buy Oppo or Realme or OnePlus, what should they look forward to or not look forward to? How should they be around when it comes to making that purchasing decision?
That's an interesting angle. So if you look at and it's an interesting thing. Many of the consumers, when we asked them in our consumer survey done a couple of years back, they didn't see OnePlus as a Chinese brand. So that was an interesting because many people thought that it's a European brand or so. But I think from the consumer angle, and by the way, all of these brands are being assembled in the Oppo factory, right? Most of them, uh, be it Realme or let's say OnePlus for that matter. For consumer, I think what they are looking at is some sort of differentiation within products. So, for example, these brands need to be very careful when it comes to their product strategy. So, for example, uh, now the hardware ceases to be a differentiating factor for a lot of these OEMs, right? So there's a lot of competition on that. You can't do much on the hardware side. It's just the ID differentiation or maybe a couple of features you are doing, but they need to be like for example on the UI side of things. So for example, the color OS in Oppo or the Oxygen OS. or the Realme UI, that is where one of the differentiator will lie. So I think consumers are very smart now. They already know what they are going to buy, and these brands need to make sure like they have this differentiated portfolio, not overlapping on at any level, be it any different price tiers.
Okay, interesting. So essentially, it's the UI that is going to be the differentiator. All three, of course, continue to remain, sister companies, even if, and the businesses will be separated. However, I want to understand what will it mean for their targets and revenues? Will that change as well for the Indian market, or will that remain constant and same as it was before the three entities separate?
Difficult to comment. Again, these strategies are very different from the like regional level. But I believe from just the observation point of view, I think it should be different. So, for example, each of these brands, when we look at, they're at a very different trajectory in terms of the maturity of the market. So, we talk about OnePlus. They has smartly transitioned from just a premium brand to now the mass market Nord series. If you look at Realme, they have been again scaling up the price tier, launching multiple models in the mid to high tier. And you have Oppo, with they have their ambitions in the premium space with the kind of the fold what they have done. So each of these brands have a very different journey in India. So I think obviously the target will be different, because if you look at the premium space, that is growing much faster than the overall smartphone market in India. So if a brand that is operating in the, let's say, premium smartphone we define as 30,000 and above, it will be a very different market scenario for them, and maybe they have their own ambitions gaining share in that segment.
It, at this stage, the only thing I want to ask you is that, does this entire move to create these three separate entities, officially make these companies and these brands safe from future prosecution? Because as we're talking about, Oppo still has proceedings against it from the Indian authorities as we speak.
Yeah, it will be again difficult to comment on the future, but if you look at that will also see what is the offline or the channel structure of what these brands take. So, for example, OnePlus used to be very online heavy brand until now, but in the recent months they have pivoted very fast in the offline channel. They have scaled, they have the tie-ups with the large format retails and doing really well on that. Realme also has their ambitions on the like expanding their reach in India. So I think again from the Oppo's perspective, they have a solid distribution structure in India. They have changed a bit post that news, and I think they are going to have something which will be very different, or very different from how they do business in other countries. So I think the nature of business might change, but the long term vision will be obviously to look at the India opportunity that is there in the rural India, because we still have 50%, 52% smartphone penetration in terms of population, and there is a room for all the players to grow and coexist at the same time. So I think it might be the way to de-risk their businesses a bit and see how each of these brands go on a different trajectory when it comes to the Indian opportunity.
The sense that India is going after Chinese brands and Chinese smartphone makers, is essentially, I wouldn't say there is a lot of merit to that, because what government has accused Oppo of is that it avoided custom duty, and that too to the point of 4,300 crore and upward. So the idea that there is a policy in place, there's a need to pay customs duty, and Oppo did not do that, and hence why government's lens, in fact IT department's lens, is on Oppo as opposed to government cracking down unilaterally on the Chinese smartphone makers.
Right, and again, very difficult to further deep dive on this issue, because it could be because of the definition issue as well. It could be because of the different legalities that are involved in each of these, be it from Vivo's angle, or be it from Oppo for that matter, or even from the Xiaomi that matter, because all of this nature, and from the looks of it, we think it's not just targeted at Chinese. It just appeared to be the Chinese brands, because these are the brands that are capturing almost like 70-75% of the smartphone market. So naturally, it seems very obvious, because Chinese brands have a lion's share of the India smartphone market. But going forward, I think there will be some kind of structure that these companies will take place. There will be they have huge operations in India. India continues to be the number one strategic market outside China. in terms of user base, again, a very solid connect with the end users. So I think these companies are here to stay. All what we have seen in the past couple of quarters is just realigning their business and see how it takes them forward for the next 5 years or 10 years down the line.
Okay. What's the way ahead for Oppo here? It has been accused there is going to be, of course, a legal battle that will ensue. And if Oppo is asked to pay up, if it refuses to pay up, or if it pays up, we don't know which way it will go. However, what's the way forward for Oppo looking like in India?
I think overall his brand is still positive, right? So if you look at from their manufacturing ambitions, they still employ large workforce. They invest a lot on the R&D. If you look at some of their products are really good. So I think, and not just the smartphones, all these companies, smartphone companies are looking at the ecosystem approach as well. So they'll not just have these devices only for that matter. Going forward, we might see something like TWS or the wearables or the hearable category or even the TVs, right? So these companies will continue to expand their reach. In India, is now the second largest smartphone market in the world, and obviously presents a great opportunity for this company. So all they need to do, and for all the companies, they need to abide by the rules of the land. I think that is the intent. But looking at the India opportunity, I think they'll continue to go very aggressive in
Okay.
this space.
Okay. Tarun, you said BBK has approximately 40% of the Indian mobile market, if I'm getting that figure right.
Yeah. Yeah.
35% of the Indian mobile market. Who are the other big players? And if, let's say, Oppo, even though it's very gung-ho on India and India as a market, however, there is a serious charge here of evasion of customs duty. If that charge is proved and it's made to pay, and that hurts its plans to continue in India, who are the other competitors we're looking at?
I think we have like Apple that is doing really well in India. Samsung is doing great. We have Motorola that is doing well, and then you have the couple of upstarts, not just the upstart, but in this space, like for example, Google is doing well with their Pixel series. We have seen nothing doing well with their first launch, and they have another new launch coming around the corner. So there are some players as well. Then you have the players like Transient, the Techno, Infinix, ITEL. So we have multiple brands that are there, but again, top five brands capture 90% of the market, and we do not see that trend changing in a big way. You might see in and out of some of the players, but largely it's likely to stay the same.
Okay. Interesting. Apple is going big on India, Krishna, and we keep talking about Apple's aspirations. We recently talked about how Apple's new Make in India big to have a plant right here in India, which is expected to start operating or send out its consignment by April of 2024. So that's just about a year from now, and Apple is being given the right sort of support and momentum, not just by the central government, but also by the state government, and posing to be a competitor, if not in volume, at least in not in the sales figure, in the number, at least in the money and the amount of market share it has by terms of price, because obviously Apple products are high end and more expensive.
Right. The fact of the matter is that Apple is still the largest in the country in terms of value. It might have sold lesser number of phones. It's going to take Oppo to sell 10 phones to match one Apple iPhone. So that's the kind of difference we're talking about over here. So the Apple story to me, the debate around it to me, it's a little done with, because all these memeing it about it being expensive, what does it do differently, why is one iPhone the same as the other iPhone? All of that have been put to rest. Look what they did with the Vision Pro. I mean, you're talking about an AR, VR headset that's there in the market. So many companies have already, introduced AR, VR headset. But when Apple introduces an AR, VR headset, you see the kind of reactions it gets. It does something different. It does something consumer friendly. It is, of course, priced at 3,500, 3 lakh rupees plus, and it will come to India only in 2024, second quarter of 2024. You're talking about first quarter of 2024 launch in the US, and then to other markets. I'm guessing India is going to be faster now than ever before, now that we have 2 stores and the 3rd store in India being open. Apple is doing a full 360 in India. In terms of sales, in terms of capturing popular imagination, in terms of manufacturing here from India, because it's making sense in every single way, not just as India a market that Apple has to explore, and is a hugely untapped market still for Apple. But India is also a great untapped manufacturing hub, which it's waking up to. Which India is becoming a wants to become a manufacturing hub for everything from semiconductors to mobile phones. And so in that sense, it fits in perfectly. And seeing what's happening in China, we were just discussing what's happening to Chinese brands in India. Apple has nowhere else to go at this stage than India. So and the moves have been
Although
very
let's
strategic.
let's not forget that Elon Musk was in Beijing just about a week ago. His private plane took off. He's had conversations with the top management and with the top sort of people, administration, politicians in China. So he's outreaching.
It wasn't Tim Cook.
It wasn't Tim Cook.
It wasn't Tim Cook. That's all I'm
Absolutely.
trying to say. People are taking their punts, and Elon Musk is somebody who's known to take contra punts, if I may. So if he wants to do that, he's free to do that. And I would say, I'm nobody to criticize Elon Musk, because most people who criticized Elon Musk fell flat on their face. So I'd say that let him go do his thing. Let Elon Musk go to China, do his thing. But even, for example, I'd give another example. Italy was one of those rare European powers which signed a deal with China. Now they're out of that deal because that deal, they realize, doesn't serve their interests well enough. So, things are going to go back and forth with China. Right. But the fact of the matter is the environment is very difficult for China, be it in terms of operating factories, keeping in mind all human rights and regulations, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, as a profitable place, so many issues it's been dealing with, and hence, Apple has been making a measured move into India. Let's face it, by the time they launched their first store, enough and more noise has been made about how many phones they're already sending it out of their plants, assembling plants here in India. What I'm looking forward to is Apple making every single thing of an iPhone right here in India, assembling it in India and setting it out, and that
Final
being
piece.
a majority of its production and exports.
All right, so obviously a robust sales is what Krishna is looking at, making not just assembling here, but making everything here in India. Where are you placed, Tarun, in this debate, about making India, not making in India, and of course the larger question on phones that are more expensive or the Chinese phones that are relatively cheaper? Who's better, who's not better? Where are you placed in this conversation?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. But if you look at of all the bigger players, they have 300 plus suppliers, component suppliers that are all over the world. Obviously, most of them used to be in China. So I think right now what we are looking at is the phase one of India, Make in India success story, which is more or less assembling. Now the second phase will be sourcing it locally. As of now, you can source chargers, cables, maybe some part of housing, another battery from India. But if you look at the display, SoC, the chipset we say, or even the memory, these three contributes to almost 60% of the cost of your phone. And none of this we have in India. And these three products can only happen if you have semiconductor fab in India. And that is where I think the government push is there for with this, the new semiconductor scheme, $10 billion incentives, looking at the display fab, OSAT assembly. So I think these will be the steps. It will not happen overnight. I think 10, 15 years is what we need to look at. But as of now, standing today, we source only 15% of what can be made out of the phone from India. Rest 85% we import it, and most of it is coming from India, Taiwan, Japan, and other countries.
Okay, and in India going big there and trying to manufacture within the country, and sooner the better. Tarun, appreciate you taking time out and joining us on this broadcast. Krishna Kumar, thanks very much for joining us with your inputs. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. Keep watching News9.